Hi, this is Eric. Welcome to the Longbox Review comic book podcast. Today's episode is another My Comics History, where I take a look at comic books from my past and for a particular time period, and I'll be talking about some of those. This time, I'll be talking about comic books that came out in January and February 1979. So going into the second year of my comic book reading and collecting, where I started out the previous year in the fall, and now we're getting into the new year. And I'll be starting to get more comic books as time goes on, of course, which means I may have to limit what I talk about. But for now, the reason I have to do January and February was because I only bought 2, possibly 3 comic books from that time period. So let's see. To start off with, there is Batman number 310, which came out January 11th. And these are on sale dates from Mike's Amazing World of Comics. And I have a very distinct memory of this comic book, but I don't have it in my collection anymore. And honestly, I don't know if I actually purchased the comic. I think I did. My memory tells me I did, but I can't corroborate that. And despite that, I'm still including it because this issue looms large in my memory, probably because this was my first introduction to the Gentleman Ghost, and which is a character that I love to this day. It's one of those oddball villains that I saw Batman fight in this issue, and I would see him pop up here and there over the years. I believe he was originally a Flash villain, or maybe a Hawkman villain, Golden Age character, or maybe I don't know. Actually, I don't know. I should probably take a look at that. But then again, there's always that whenever they retcon the DC universe, who knows what. Where he first appeared in terms of the in-universe timeline. But anyway, this was my first introduction to the Gentleman Ghost, and I actually reread the issue last year at some point and kind of flipped through it for this recording, for this episode. And I have to say that issue just doesn't hold up for me. So, that's what memory does to you sometimes. And so I still like it. I still like it for the fact that, it was a quote unquote ghost. And I think his name was Jim Craddock. Anyway, Batman has to deal with the supernatural, which he, adamantly opposes the whole idea of it, even though he, deals with supernatural stuff all the time. But anyway, back in January of 1979, I don't know how much actual supernatural stuff that he was dealing with, but he had to go up against the Gentleman Ghost, and so I really like the cover where it's I think the Gentleman Ghost is on a stage coach driving that, and the Batman is kind of hanging off of it. Anyway, I really like that cover. And I think Gentleman Ghost is one of those characters I maybe should spotlight at some point because I really like that guy. Also purchased back then in January and February are 2 issues of Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man. The first of which is issue number 29, which came out January 23rd, and issue 30, which came out the following month on the 20th. And those are the 2 issues that I will be talking about today. And as you may recall, if you've listened to a previous episode of My Comics History, I've already spotlighted an issue of Spider-Man, and this may be the last time I do it. I don't honestly remember. I mean, I'm sure if I keep doing these throughout my comics history, I will spotlight other Spider-Man comics, but this is the last time towards the beginning of my comic book collecting, I think, that I will be looking at Spider-Man comics because, like I said that last time, I was a big Spider-Man fan. 2 of the issues that I purchased that started me off on this long journey were Spider-Man issues, and there was the Spider-Man live-action television series on TV around this time. Anyway, I'll talk about those a little bit later. Comics that I purchased later that came out in this time frame are Marvel 2-in-1 number 50, which came out January 2nd. So this is the Thing versus Thing anniversary issue. And so, it also being issue number 50, it's kind of one of those, our arbitrary so-called anniversary issues. But I read that issue a couple of years ago. I think I blogged about it on the website. Honestly, don't remember too much about the story at the moment, other than Thing versus Thing on the cover. Also out in January 11th, DC Comics presents number 8. This is a Swamp Thing issue. Well, Swamp Thing focused with, teaming up with Superman. They go up against Solomon Grundy. I read that some years ago as part of the DC Comics Presents Showcase, the black and white reprint volume that it was in, that first volume. Next up is an issue I got later, but have read since then because of who Batman teams up with in Brave and the Bold number 149, released on January 25th. He teams up with the Teen Titans. And I think that's the one I really should open these links up so I can actually see which comic I'm talking about. Oh, no, I was thinking of the one where I was thinking of a different one. This is one where the supposedly the Titans are attacking Batman. So there you go. Written by Bob Haney, which, oh yeah, Bob Haney was great. Next up is Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes, number 250, out on January 25th, also an anniversary issue. Cover has Superboy, followed by the Legionnaires as they burst through the cover, which itself is a collection. The cover background is a collection of Superboy-related covers over the years. And I think I've read that one. Pretty sure I've read that one some time ago. At the end of the month, so Marvel 2-in-1 actually had apparently 2 issues out in the month. That month, Marvel 2-in-1 number 51, where you get not 1, not 2, but 4 guest stars. These include The Beast, Ms. Marvel, Nick Fury, and Wonder Man. And again, I read this a couple years ago, blogged about it. I will have to say it was not in my list of particularly enjoyable or good issues from that run of Marvel 2-in-1 that I read. I'll have a link in the show notes for that blog post since I've already mentioned it twice. Anyway, I expected a little bit more given the pedigree of the guest stars, but and the number of, for that matter, it should be this big, interesting story. And from what I remember, not so much. Anyway, next up in February, DC Comics presents number 9, where Wonder Woman teams up with Superman. I believe that's the one where they go up against some sort of, looks like a frost giant with a crown or something. I don't know. Superman Family number 195, February 8th also. So this is part of a run of Superman Family that I have from issues 182 to 200. And I distinctly remember when I bought this, or where I bought this. It was at Captain Comics in Boise, Idaho, which is a great comic book shop. So if you are in that area, I highly recommend you go to Captain Comics. Anyway, two reasons I wanted to get this. One was I wanted that run. I wanted to get a complete run of Superman Family because it's an anthology series, a bunch of different stories in each issue, and it was an issue I didn't have. Also, it had Supergirl on the cover, had Supergirl fighting Superboy, and I wanted to read that story. Well, guess what? As I recall, because I did read that issue, that fight never happens. So I was pulled in by the cover, and then the promise of the cover was a lie. It was all a lie. But that's okay, because I think I remember enjoying that generally, that issue. Anyway, next up is Brave and the Bold, number 150. Also, a lot of 50s, 150s, 250s in January, February 1979. This came out February 22nd, and on the cover it has Batman teaming up with ? And spoiler alert, it's Superman, which, as I recall, is a pretty good issue. Except for, is that the one where Superman apparently has a new superpower where he can walk through walls? Something like that. I remember something like that. And then finally, coming out, or comics that I purchased later at that time, Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes number 251, out also on February 22nd. Brainiac 5 goes insane and creates Omega. I don't think I've actually read that issue. even though I've had it in my collection for years. I believe it's because of his mental breakdown after this that I first saw Brainiac 5 as a mental patient in issue 254, which is my first Legion of Superheroes issue. Other notable comics, I should say, that came out around this time that I have not purchased. The Uncanny X-Men number 120, out on January 16th. I believe that is the first appearance of Alpha Flight. Correct me if I'm wrong about that. Daredevil 158 on January 30th. This is the first Frank Miller Daredevil issue, and it is the one issue of the run of Daredevil comics that I have that has eluded me. And I've recently decided I don't care anymore because I just don't. It's just because it's the first Frank Miller Daredevil. It's just I don't want to pay that much for it, especially since I read it on the Marvel Unlimited app, and it is not that great of a story. Actually, Daredevil goes up against a supernatural-like adversary, kind of like Batman did with Gentleman Ghost. It's okay. It's it's just because it's a first Frank Miller issue that I can't have it to complete my run. But that's all right. Maybe I'll just buy a collection with it in it and be done with it. Next up is ElfQuest number 1. So a big deal for that time period, coming out on February 1st. This was previously, according to the information I read, it was previously published in Fantasy Quarterly featuring ElfQuest number 1 the previous year, but this is a debut issue for ElfQuest itself, and that was a pretty big deal back then. A small independent publisher. Wow, having trouble with that word. Independent publisher, outside of Marvel and DC. So there you go. And then finally, notable for very personal reasons, Black Panther number 15 coming out on February 13th. This is the final issue of the Black Panther volume. With the story continuing in Marvel Premiere issues 51 through 53. I read this and talked a little bit about it in my Pull List Review January 2024 episode, which should be, or is, already in the feed. So, there you go. And I should say, in that issue, Black Panther goes up against Claw. All right, so those are the comics that came out around that time, and I'll just get right into my spotlight of Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, issues 29 and 30. These are by Jim Mooney, Bill Mantlo, Frank Springer, Ben Shahn, Irving Watanabe, and Jim Novak. Although no colorist was listed for issue 30. It was not listed in the issue. It's not listed on the Grand Comic Books database. It's not listed in Mike's Amazing World of Comics. It's not listed in the archive.org version of the comic book database, which usually, I can find pretty much everything I want by consulting those sources, and nothing. I was surprised. I even put it out on social media to see if anybody had any information. I got nothing. So I'm going to assume that the color artist is the same one for issue 29. All right, here are the synopses for both issues. Again, these are from the Marvel Database Wiki with a little bit of tweaking on my part. These two were actually pretty good, pretty well written as compared to some of the other ones I've had in the past. But all right, the first issue is titled Dust to Dust. And this is the second issue of the story involving the character of Carrion and White Tiger. But while I have read that digitally, I didn't, I hadn't read it until maybe this year. Even though we're coming into the second part of I think it's a 4-part story, really. I'm only going to focus on 29 and 30 because those are the issues that I had purchased. Which, did I mention? I actually don't have those in my collection anymore, which maybe I should rectify that. Oh no, I don't need any more comics. All right. Carrion has Peter Parker at his mercy and intends to kill Parker for revenge over an unspecified murder when Holly Gillis walks in. When she realizes Hector has been knocked out by Carrion, Peter manages to talk her into escaping with Hector before Carrion can harm her. With her gone, Peter tries to fight off Carrion, but only gets red gets some red death dust tossed in his face before Carrion disappears, vowing to fight Peter later. Peter just barely manages to prevent himself from injury when his last leap at Carrion sends him out of the window into the bushes below. Revived, Hector checks on the situation as White Tiger before he and Holly take Peter to the hospital. Unfortunately, Peter was not wearing his Spider-Man costume, which he notably points out in the issue. Ordered to rest on doctor's orders, Peter leaves to return to class, where he, Flash Thompson, and Hector theorize about who Carrion may be. Peter bumps into Randy Vale, who is looking forward to Peter being his teaching assistant in the next term. However, we find out just in the next scene that Randy is secretly Carrion's agent. As Peter attends his classes at ESU, Hector is watching him over as the White Tiger and is attacked by Vale, who has been outfitted with a costume and weapons and now calling himself Darter. With White Tiger occupied, Peter is attacked once more by Carrion. During the fight, Peter is able to change into Spider-Man. Their fight is taken to ESU's gymnasium, and it is briefly interrupted when White Tiger and Darter smash into the gym. Finally, having Spider-Man where he wants him, Carrion tells him what he accuses Spider-Man of: the murder of Gwen Stacy and Miles Warren. All right, issue 30, Secret as the Grave. After Carrion's accusation, the two continue their fight while White Tiger is busy fighting off Darter. During the fight, Spider-Man is knocked into the ESU pool. It's then that White Tiger and Darter's fight is taken into the same room and distracts Carrion. Carrion knocks White Tiger off a diving board and White Tiger passes out. Carrion puts Spider-Man to sleep with another dose of his red death dust. Taking Spider-Man to a secret lab, Carrion takes some of Spider-Man's genetic material and creates a creature based on ancient arachnids. When Peter revives, Carrion reveals to him that he is a living clone of Professor Miles Warren. All right, let's start with the cover for issue 29, Pollard and McCloud. Oh, I did not finish my my credits. Both covers are by Keith Pollard and Bob McCloud. Sorry about that. Okay, so like I said, Pollard and McCloud did a great job of depicting the peril our hero is in while inviting us in to see how this fight will go, because it's got Spider-Man, his face large on the cover, and these two arms and hands are reaching out from our perspective, from our point of view, and wringing his neck. And I thought that's just a great superhero comic book cover saying, "Oh my gosh, you have to read me," which is probably why I picked it up. Besides it just being a Spider-Man book, the first page extends that imagery by showing Carrion strangling Peter. So I thought that was nice. I also like how the story title is depicted as dust on the floor over the unconscious body of Hector Ayala, a.k.a. the White Tiger, whom I would find out much later was a co-creation of George Perez's. So this is my first introduction to White Tiger, and I think because of this, and also because I know he was co-created by Perez, that he's been kind of one of those minor Marvel superheroes that I've always had an interest in. And so one of these days I'm going to go read a bunch of White Tiger's appearances. I did encounter, I believe it's his sister or cousin, or I don't remember now. Anyway, another member of the Ayala family, I believe, that's correct, took over as White Tiger. Briefly, I think. I don't know what the current status of White Tiger is, but I've always enjoyed that character for some reason. Anyway, because of that fondness, I was displeased to see that he was killed off in an issue of Daredevil many years later. But like I said, somebody else took up the mantle. During the first fight, Carrion is shown to levitate, or as he states, quote, "My nature is such that the very air repels me away from it," a rather macabre form of levitation. And Carrion does this kind of, I don't know, overwrought declarations, such as this during the stories. It's when you find out that he is a clone of Miles Warren, that kind of that professorial attitude or outlook, it kind of makes sense, I guess, but it's just, I don't know, it just seems like a little bit of heavy-handedness in the prose. This idea that Carrion is so antithetical to physical matter is intriguing to me, though. Probably more so now when I reread these issues back then, when I read them the first time. It also applies to other objects, such as the books he hurls at Peter in the next scene. I guess it's a macabre form of telekinesis. I don't know. Later, he appears to be able to teleport and negates Spider-Man's spider sense. And we'll see more abilities in the next issue. So it's just like, it seems like he, even though he's the clone of a old professor, he has developed a bunch of powers as the situation needs. Like, so he's kind of like the encapsulation of, like, say, if I may cross the streams, Superman, who would develop superpowers over time to address the situation at hand. And so other writers would pick those up and reuse them and change them. So I don't know. It's just in one issue, this guy has many different powers. It's weird. It's a pity the storyline wasn't a bit longer in the stretch of the series, because that way then the introduction of Randy Vale as one of Peter's students, who ends up being in league with Carrion, of course, would have more of an impact, I think, instead of, oh, here's this guy, and then literally I think it's the next panel that Vale is thinking to himself, Carrion and I will have revenge on you, Parker. I don't know. I don't remember exactly what he said, but it's just like, dang, it's like they just introduced the guy. It's just boom, there it is. I don't know. Comics back then were just, they had to get a lot of stuff done in a short amount of time, because we couldn't have these long drawn out storylines like we do for the most part. And so yeah, that, like I said, that reveal on the next page. I said panel. It's the next page. It's a bit anticlimactic, right? Also on the reveal page is another revelation that's not touched on again in this issue, and that is Mary Jane and some of Peter's other friends are fixing up his apartment after it was trashed in the previous issue. And it's these kinds of slice of life scenes that I loved about Spider-Man comics at that time, or of that time. I don't know that we got anything more. Yeah, we do. Yeah, I don't know. Now I'm misremembering or not remembering correctly, so I won't go any further than that. The serendipity of Carrion's accusation that Spider-Man killed Gwen Stacy and my introduction to that death just mere months before, though it was at that time 6 years of publication time. I don't know that I realized it back then, but obviously now, gives weight to this issue that I don't think I ever thought of. So. All right, so that's issue 29. The cover to issue 30 appropriately shows our hero fighting back. He's springing towards Carrion in the gymnasium. You can clearly see a basketball hoop in the background. Maybe Spider-Man is actually jumping off of the basketball hoop. Anyway, and you got Darter and, well, no, maybe not Darter, but you got White Tiger collapsed on the floor in the background. However, I don't think that this cover conveys the sort of power and urgency that the previous issue did, but it's fine. I don't understand Carrion's goal here in this issue, because after he accuses Spider-Man of murder, they fight, and he throws that crimson dust at Spider-Man. It's clearly shown to be acidic because it burns through varnished wood, like instantly, which of course would have severely injured or killed Peter had it actually struck him. Although, it's dust. It's inconsistent, because some of the dust probably would have gotten on Peter and burned him, but we don't see that. Yet later, he renders Peter unconscious to place him in a death trap with the same dust. So it's like he has a satchel, Carrion does, and he reaches in, and that's where the dust comes from. So does he have two different pockets in there? I don't know. It's weird. It's convenient. Anyway, so he like I said, he's throwing this acidic dust at Peter, trying to kill him, I guess, but then he captures Peter and then puts him in this death trap. Is it just to show that he's unstable? Maybe we get an extension of Carrion's power in that any organic matter, liquid or solid, is repulsed from him when it comes in contact with him, such as when he stomps on Spider-Man's fingers. And and we see that maybe not as effectively shown visually, but the idea is that it burns Peter's fingers. when Spider-Man knocks him back while in the gymnasium, Carrion falls in the swimming pool and all of the water explodes away from him. At which, it's a cool visual. It's kind of neat, but, why? Why is this needed? He could just levitate out of the water. I do like how we continue to see his otherness. He is supposed to be the antithesis of life, as he says later, after all. Darter's abilities also morph as needed in this story. When he's entangled by White Tiger in some ropes or something up above in the gymnasium, Darter uses fingertip lasers in his gloves to free himself. But this is this is the weird part about it. It's the fact that Darter makes specific mention of this, that Carrion had him add those lasers. It's like, does Carrion also have like precognitive abilities? I don't know. It's just weird. A weird detail that I don't know that they needed to highlight. Once Carrion is able to incapacitate White Tiger, he subdues Spider-Man with, like I said, that knockout dust, and declares the final stage of his revenge draws nigh. Again, to me, it's like, then why did you throw the killer red dust at him? Back at Carrion's lab, Carrion pontificates about how Professor Warren passed on his hatred of Peter to Carrion, saying, "I only exist so that you might be destroyed." See, there you go again. "Thus I am the ultimate negation, the anti-life." The anti-life. No wonder Darkseid never found it. He was looking in the wrong universe. All right. But at the end, he calls himself the living clone of Warren. So shouldn't he be repulsing himself if he's living? I don't know. I know I'm nitpicking now, but I do it out of fun. Regardless, we'd have to read next issue for the incredible resolution of this cliffhanger, which I did not, of course, as I said before, read back in 1979, though not by choice. I'm sure if I had seen that issue on the magazine stands that I had access to back then, I would have picked it up, because this was one of the first. It wasn't the first, because that was Spider-Man 187 and 188, I think, or Green Lantern. Was it Green Lantern 111, 112? I don't know. So this must be the third time that I got subsequent issues of a particular title. But I did, of course, read it this year when preparing for this episode. So, by the way, I read in Tom Brevoort's newsletter that Mantlo had intended that Carrion would be revealed as the resurrected, can you guess? Norman Osborn. Which I think totally fits the character of Carrion, right down to the satchel he wears. However, editor at that time, Marv Wolfman, put a stop to that for some reasons. I think it was said in the newsletter that Wolfman thought that it was too soon, and I think he had plans himself for Osborn later. Anyway, so it was changed at the last minute to Miles Warren. So how interesting would it have been if Mantlo had been able to continue with his plan? What kind of revelation, and how much would that issue be worth these days if it had been the return of Norman Osborn? Kind of reminds me of this has happened a few times in comics, but the revelation in, what was it? I don't remember the character's name now. Armageddon 2001, the villain in that, but it was supposed to be Captain Atom. But I think because people, the burgeoning internet at that time, everybody had guessed it was Captain Atom, and DC editorial decided to change it up last minute and turn it into Hawk of Hawk and Dove, and just made it worse. So, is this worse? I mean, it works to some degree. I think it works in terms of the relationships that Peter had with various people, including Miles Warren has a connection to Gwen Stacy, and Warren's, I'll just say, fondness for Gwen. But, I really think it would have been a lot more impactful if we had gotten the intended revelation that Mantlo wanted to do. So Anyway, there you go. That's my comics history for January, February 1979. If you have any feedback for me, please send it to me. Email me at longboxreview@gmail.com or leave comments at the website or my various social media presence? Yeah, anyway. So thank you for listening, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.